Okay, so the topic for our meeting tonight is why our human aspect is the most important aspect of your multidimensional self. And that's a really hot topic because we have to completely flip the script right now about everything that we've ever been told. And one of the things that I didn't really believe, but I certainly was told, was that we were the lowest intelligence in the universe. So that was like a given, like humans are really dumb and dense. You know, and then also the rest of society thinks that, of course, we're alone in the universe. So there's another script to flip. And what I want to dig into today is if your human aspect is truly the most powerful and potent aspect of your multidimensional self, including your Orion self, your Arcturian self, your Sirian self, all of those other selves. Why is that? What does the human DNA do? What are we capable of? And later in the meeting, what I want to get into is like, how have we been manipulated and not been possibly fully sovereign, such that our frontal lobes did not completely develop, because apparently we only use about 10% of our brain. And our emotions, our feelings apparently can cause like an enormous electromagnetic field that radiates out through the multiverse. So I'm going to start with some examples and then we'll see where we go with this conversation. So, and you can kind of recollect, like right now, have you touched into some of those supernatural, natural human abilities that you have? Because we are one of the few beings in the multiverse that can travel without a spaceship. So we travel by star Merkaba. So when our heart is activated, you don't need a plasma ship. You can travel anywhere. And I would invite anyone who has not seen our previous videos to watch some of the videos where I talk about the of my heart. 3 taps and my star Merkaba came out of my chest. Okay. Now I want to just tell you a couple other things that have happened. So our heart has a field that's like 3 to 8 feet around your body. That's an enormous torsion field. And you can spread and radiate that torsion field based on your feelings, your frequencies. In my video on Chiron, which is on Lalita Karoli, I tell about when I was in the hospital and my like maternal experience of wanting to protect my baby. And the attendants were trying to take her and vaccinate her. And I started to get so upset that all the lights went off in the whole hospital. And I was really like, they were trying to convince me that she needed to be fully inspected, even if not vaccinated. And I was like, you are not touching my baby. Like, even if I'm bleeding all over the floor and about to die, you are not taking my baby. And then the lights continued to be off, and I saw come down the street a tornado come right down the street, and it looked me in the eye like it was an energy source from my own body. And then it went back down the street, and the nurses left, of course, because then the power was out and roofs were being ripped off all over. And you can reference this on May 20th of 1996 in Newburgh, New York. That's when Kachina was born. You can reference that tornado. So many things like that have happened to me in my life, and they are mostly like when I was really upset. Like Claude can verify, tornadoes smack landing right into the Vermont landscape when I was really upset. Wham, trees ripped down everywhere. And he's like, Lalita, you gotta calm down. And we have that power, and that's mostly based on when I'm very upset. Now my phone is ringing, so I'm gonna mute right now prematurely and let someone else talk. So go ahead and just Nobody knows what to say to that yet, right? I was in the middle of a hot story and like the weird call came in. Maybe who knows what that was. Okay. So what I'm also going to suggest is that when I'm really upset, these kind of things can happen. I have many examples, mostly of tornadoes and cyclones that happened when I was really upset. So my friends in Australia can verify that I had a very bizarre interference from a malevolent energy when I was in St. Kilda, which is just below Melbourne. And I was really upset, and I was being driven down to the seaside to kind of walk it off and smudge. And my guide, who is from that area, suddenly saw the whole sky went dark and trees started flying, and a cyclone had formed on the water and was coming toward me. And that was 2.5 years ago that happened. And immediately after that, I looked at it and I kind of registered, okay, I'm going to calm down now. And then 2 double rainbows came out. So when I'm upset, that can happen. But imagine if it wasn't from me being upset, but it was from me radiating love and ecstasy and the feeling of bliss and surrender and commitment to the divine. If I could really register that, what an effect we would have. And what I also want to hear is from people's perspective, what are the human capabilities? Because I know some people in this group have other capabilities than like bringing about tornadoes. But I think that we have access as a human to many other dimensions, that only when you're a human can you access all of these dimensions. Otherwise, say you're Arcturian, you exist in that dimension, but you can't really come back down to 3D and then go back up to 9D. And I might be wrong, but I want to hear, this is like one of those topics we don't have any like textbook information on. So you don't have to be right, but you can just tell me what you think.
I've had experiences, Lolita, of being very upset. Can you hear me? Okay. And it raining or like thundering and stuff. And I think Grant's witnessed a couple of those before.
Yep.
So that's all I have to say. It kind of freaks me out, and so then I stop thinking about it. So yeah, I've taken my drum out and sang in nature and played, and it does seem that I'm connecting with something much bigger than myself, and yeah, it just kind of freaks me out, and so then I just kind of walk away. I don't know what to do with it. So.
Yeah, there's a period when I kept seeing double rainbows at significant times, and I think we both saw, like, there was just a time when we just kept seeing double rainbows, and it was really, yeah, I felt really touched by it.
Yeah, keep going, guys. Just tell me anything that arises to your mind, because we're breaking ground here, okay?
Yeah, I've had weather patterns. And also the flip side of the weather patterns is I've also been able to stop and also predict and sort of place my energy in stopping things, particularly around hurricanes and tornadoes, those kind of things. So I've also done the reverse when directed, and many times stopped car accidents by placing my hand out to stop the energy that was coming at me or coming at a car next to me. And the first time I did it, I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was just my reaction to what was coming at me. And then I realized after doing it multiple times that I was actually taking my full force of energy and preventing car accidents. And then of course through waking up and things like that, I've blown circuitry in the house and televisions and, you know, all kinds of circuitry, particularly when, you know, just a massive amount of energy comes through. Suddenly, you know, I've blown out cell phones. I think I went through 3 cell phones one year, you know, just constantly blowing them out. So I'm familiar.
Yeah, so so now you all are hearing some different possibilities, and what Laura's talking about, like when your gadgets all blow up, which has happened many times here with laptops and overhead lighting and the complete circuitry of the house. So we're really powerful like that. And I'm coming to these memories of, I saw what Laura's explaining, a train was coming and I saw a car like ignore the signal in Windsor, Vermont, and you all can look this one up too. And I saw the car like stall out on the tracks. And I immediately called to whatever divinity. I said, come in now, stop that. And the train started to screech and slow down. And when it hit the car, I thought everyone's going to be dead. I mean, that was unbelievable. The car spun off. And the energy that I pulled the car toward me, I said, protect them all. And I went to the car and there were 3 babies and 3 adults. And some of the babies weren't properly harnessed in. They were like sitting on adult laps. Everyone was fine. And that was in Windsor, Vermont. And then I was interviewed afterwards by the police, like what happened? And I was like, well, I'm not going to tell you the supernatural part, but this is what I saw. You know, they were trying to figure out whether they needed to press charges or whether lights worked or did not. Like, you know, that was neither here nor there for me. But those are the type of things. And I know when hurricanes are created by forces that are trying to disrupt, what Laura's saying, my mother lives in Florida, so I will see the eye of the hurricane and I'll see it swirling and I'll send a pink light down into it and I'll whirl it the other way. So we have that power too. And those hurricanes, which my mother's like, you know, battening down the hatches and trying to survive, they don't take out Florida. So we have that ability also. And this leads me more into keep thinking about if we really have at least 23 different star systems DNA. And as the video that I posted in our group today by Greg Braden was talking about on missing links, so let me just pull out a couple of different things here. And some people haven't seen this video or didn't have time to see this video. It's also on my Facebook page. So what Greg is talking about is 3 different studies. And one of the studies is from the 1990s where random photons were placed in one container. And the photons were doing random things. They didn't organize themselves at all. And then in a second container, human DNA was placed. And the photons immediately started to organize themselves. So because photons are the smallest particle that we know of, our human DNA is potentially organizing that quantum reality of source consciousness. Our human DNA is organizing that. Okay, so that's very interesting. It's called nanobiology. And then there was another experiment in 1994 in which an umbilical cord, which has pristine DNA, was placed in the proximity of a human being and their heart field radiating out 3 to 8 feet. When the human was angry, the DNA constricted, it hardened. Now this is an umbilical cord that's not attached to a baby. But then what happened when positive emotions of compassion, appreciation, gratitude, and care started to radiate out from that human heart field, the DNA started to relax, uncoil, and even replicate itself. So the human heart field and our DNA has much to do with our feelings of things, which is what I'm talking about right now. Is my experience mostly is when I'm very upset, the climate changes. So we're able to revitalize our own DNA through heart-centered compassion, love, and intimacy. And so that's one of the things that we can see has been kind of, in our last video, we talked about implanted, co-opted, artificially constructed stories of the masculine and the feminine that would divide, all things that could happen to reduce intimacy has happened so far. So if we, as kind of the magi who want to re-template the whole of it, can really get a hold of this and stand in our sovereignty and say, okay, we know we've been messed with, and we're going to stand in our sovereignty now and do whatever we can to reconnect those heart magnetic fields and stand in intimacy no matter what the raw fear feelings. That's like the seed that we're planting. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, because still, you know, I'm hoping Claude doesn't cause, you know, enough emotion in me that I'm taking down trees again. but if it does, it just shows us how powerful we are. And it's my choice also to be reactive or not reactive, based on this whole other giant study that we mostly act out of our subconscious, which is like the unconscious realm that was developed from womb to 6 years old, when basically we're in a state of hypnosis, and all these patterns from our parents and our collective past are in us, so that I'm always reacting to the fears that I have from my collective past with my partner. So now I'm going to stop here again and see if anyone wants to talk about that.
I think it's fascinating that you're bringing that up, because I was writing about the same thing this week. And I think this comes from Carl Jung, the idea that the unconscious rules us, and the more that we can face it, the less it confronts us as fate. But the more we repress and ignore it, then we cause it to grow even bigger. So it is a part of like reclaiming our power to face all that stuff that's uncomfortable deep within us. So it's in the field.
Yeah, do you hear what Jessica's saying? So our collective unconscious, from what we talked about the last session of the last 6,000 years, is in all of us. And it's the imprints that we have from our parents, but all the trauma and the catastrophobia throughout the whole galaxy of all our other star incarnations is also in us. So one of the things that I posted this week when we were talking about the galactic alignment is to be aware also of those unconscious patterns from other star systems of, for instance, my two known Orion friends were commenting that the galactic shift was going to happen after we learn our lesson. And I'm going, oh yes, Orion. Oh yes. After we've been interfered with so much and had our chakras changed around and our genitalia messed with by the Orions, we're going to learn our lesson. And I know that's one of my things, because I was there when we were there in the fourth dimension to the fifth dimensional shift. So I had an aspect there from Orion that was more of a hermit and a seer, much like I am now, because that's my character, you know, like hiding up here in Vermont. But I know that the Orions want us to like suffer and learn our lesson. So there's a big question in me about like our collective unconscious from the star systems of how this shift is going to happen. Is it going to be a prolonged, like, you have to learn to protect your womb and therefore bring in a baby who feels safe because you didn't learn your lesson? Or is there a possibility that, and this is what I'm always trying to figure out, that it's more like a cymatic change, where being that our human DNA totally affects the field of the whole multiverse, can we decide to let this experiment happen more like a cymatic change, where one frequency is showing one geometry, and then a shift happens with a change within us, but of course we have to deal with the unconscious, and then a different pitch or tone is made. If you know cymatics, it makes a whole different geometry. And the shift happens like that. All right, so I'll leave it. If this is going way over your head, like, what is Lisa talking about? That's okay, because one of my intentions today was just to be able to articulate it. It's important for me to be able to say this, okay? So let's hear from anyone.
So I actually have quite a bit I can add to what you're saying, because beyond just our DNA's effect on the universe, when you break it down even further, there's mitochondrial DNA, which is the mother principle that is about what we are embodying. So as we step into ourselves and literally, you know, through Kundalini activations, I guess the best word would be shedding or dying off of old programming, because that programming comes in through the birth process and the sequencing of the birth. So you get imprints, genetic layers, it could be star systems, it can be programming from Earth, it can be all kinds of things that come in that you're imprinted with from your womb. And then this whole process is about shedding that. It is about reconnecting to the original blueprint, which isn't what we were marked with through the birth canal. The birth canal is the place that the hijacking actually occurs. It is the place that the reincarnational cycle has been most prevalent in, because they continue to mark in with genetic patterns. So a starseed or other people from other star systems came in here with genetics that would hopefully override some of those imprints if they woke up, if they started to understand the capability of being in a human body, because it really comes in from embodiment. Because as we bring in that light into those mitochondria cells, we're activating, or what I would call like sort of quantum energy, which brings it into the ATP production, which allows us to bring in light. And so as the more light that we're able to bring in, the more we're able to affect the universe. And that goes into what you're saying about cymatics. It's like all of a sudden you quantumly can just jump there and allow that change in a split second by rearranging the DNA and the cellular structure like in an instant. It's not, there's no, you know, leaping, you know, we can leap anywhere, but there's no like, oh, we have to go in a linear progression through that and take eons of time, because that we already did. So we're doing something completely different. What I find also interesting, and you and I touched on it when we spoke earlier in the week, thinking about Orion and Orion's, you know, sort of imprint on us. When we think about that, Orion is a matriarchal system. And when you let that sink in and you understand that there is a queen that is operating out of the Orion system, and that the men are basically playing out what that matriarchal system wants, it is a woman that did this to our biological process as a human. And that's a lot to take in, because it's sort of like dark feminine versus sacred feminine, and you start to see those changes and where it organically and inorganically took place in the womb. So it's a for me, you know, it makes my heart contract over the idea that this is also coming from a matriarchal system, and we're shedding that through bringing in that light and making it organic, and the divine mother is able to come in, because that was what was prevented through this whole process.
Anyone want to jump in right now on what Laura has said? Do you have a response in your body even? Like, what's going on for people?
Yeah, I'm feeling that all week. I don't like that. I don't know what to, but I'm like working on healing something up here in my own heart chakra. And like, you know, some of my connections with the Orion system, I kind of in some ways feel like I'm right in the middle, trying to negotiate both sides between the dark and the light. And what popped into my head, Laura, when you were talking was like how we use the light to activate the DNA. My question too is using the void space as well. I think that we use that to kind of like a vacuum cleaner, maybe to pull out things. Because I've definitely had experiences, and Grant's experiences before too, where especially before my cycle begins, it's like my Merkaba isn't going out anymore. It goes in. If that makes sense. Like I just, you know, there's like, I become the void, or I'm going into the void. And I don't know if other people have that experience, but I think that's one thing that I personally am trying to figure out how to navigate with the, you know, I think of the Dark Queen as the Ereshkigal myth, the woman who's in the underworld, who's just kind of constantly stuck in this grief cycle, and she can't get out of her grief, and so she's destroying everything all the time. And so that a part of our healing the Divine Mother is also healing that Dark Queen as well. And how trauma kind of programs us to be confused, that maybe deep in our psyche we don't even believe in the divine feminine mother anymore. And maybe Grant, you want to talk about this, because we were exploring a lot with the Red Queen, like what does the true Queen of Hearts look like? Do we believe that she's real? Because the divine feminine on Earth hasn't been, I mean, she's not in our Western spiritual forefront, certainly not in evangelical Christianity. It's all patriarchal images that we're given. The Catholic Church has Mary, but she's kind of been desexed and disempowered and seen as a prop to the patriarchy. I think that's starting to shift a lot in the past 10 years, but it's like ever since the goddess temples were closed, it's just a big movement, I think, to heal that dark feminine energy. I'm rambling.
No, I think I'll just jump in here really quick, and then I'll let somebody else talk. But I want to acknowledge, because being a polarity integrator, taking that dark and light and being that force that brings those together is not an easy agreement to have. And I've done a lot of work, as you are acknowledging in yourself, doing the same thing. It's about seeing both sides of that and where to find yourself in the middle. I have a similar experience with the void of like descending in to myself. It does happen around like menstruation, but it also happens at other times that I've found when I've been doing, you know, very specific work. And and just even identifying the places in me that hold the dark mother, or as Lolita was talking about last week about the weaponized woman, I mean, where that comes from, and sort of like how that's programmed in to really be a response on this planet, and how often we, you know, can't find the divine feminine in anything. Like that's been my probably biggest heartache, is looking out there and not seeing the reflection of a part of me that exists, and not being able to see it, you know, constantly, you know, being faced with archetypes that I understand, but they're fragments of me. You know, I can't see the wholeness coming together, and yet can so easily identify all the darkness. You know, that was always like right there for anybody to take and grab. And so, you know, I can acknowledge in you, because being a polarity integrator, bringing those pieces together, for anybody that does that work, is it's a very, very tough contract to have, to come in here and clear. And it very rarely gets talked about in terms of how hard that is. It's not an easy thing to do, to sit in that. And if I'm remembering right, you've got Scorpio energy, correct?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a Scorpio ascendant.
Yeah.
So trying to. Yeah,
and
figure it out.
I'm deep diving in Scorpio this year as part of my solar return, so I can identify it completely.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to say that it's like, as you touched on, Jessica, was with the like Virgin Mary kind of complexes, and it's really interesting with the woman, especially in like evangelical Christianity background, when you get the image of the woman as like this pure white kind of like holy saint, and you kind of think, okay, that's what I'm aspiring to. And because you don't really have like an understanding of the dark mother or black Lilith or anything like that, then you kind of, all of that kind of icky stuff as well that's there, like what you're talking about the Queen of Orion and that kind of like manipulation and control, you don't really learn to own that. So it's like learning to, like for me, I've been learning to balance that in and owning that, so that I can be strong and figure out what, you know, what is, I don't know, malevolent and what is benevolent, and holding that into that space. And what I've been able to connect with recently, I've been thinking a lot about my maternal line and my grandma, and feeling very connected to my grandma. And what I've understood from my mum's perspective of my grandma is a lot of control and manipulation from childhood, and, you know, go on. I looked at my mum's chart recently, and it's like in my mum's chart. It's really interesting, like recognizing and becoming conscious of that, and then seeing it in myself, and especially seeing it in our relationship play out in our home. Yeah. I want to share that.
That's beautiful. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, you do have to wonder, to touch back on that Red Queen perspective, you know, if there's media or kind of this upper level of manipulation is happening to help keep that fragmented and not provide the holistic archetype of that feminine, who can hold all those aspects, who can embody the different goddesses as needed, sort of, but hold all of it in a container that's the womb space, right? That it's just missing. We're not seeing examples of that. We've lost the cultural memory there, I think. I think we all intuitively can feel that, but we don't have, we're not seeing it reflected a lot, like you said, Laura.
Anybody, any other male perspective? I'd love to hear any male perspective on this too. So,
Lolita, thank you for bringing together this conversation. It's so far from my usual conversation. It's great. So I love it. And I appreciate your kind of courage to help open up this space. You know, I'm watching right now with my boys, The Matrix, and it's really interesting because it's, you know, analogous about living in a kind of a mental prison, basically, that's being controlled so that you can give energy to something else. I guess right now for Shannon and I, we have so much that's uncertain for us. It's about where the money is going to come from, what country we're going to be in, all the stuff's going on. So it is quite triggering, the kind of uncertainty, and it's great to be reminded of, I guess I would call it surrender and living on faith, and maybe that we're actually creating the experience, a lot of it. And then I guess just this recent discussion, it seems like it's delving into shadow work, so the shadow, and then talking about integrating, of course, first like in ourselves, the shadow, and then also somehow shifting our perception of the world and somehow redeeming all the wounds and the negative stuff, somehow finding the gift inside that is a key to being able to get into that heart-centered space that transcends the judging, and that awakens that connection between us, how we can all really feel connected and nourished from source. That's all. That's what I've got.
So I'm going to pull that forward because I know Ken and I know Shannon, and they've been here for some of our ceremony, where what we're doing is we're doing ceremony together where we're bringing that heart connection. I can really feel kind of the tenderness in you, Ken, when you're talking. Like I can hear it and I can feel it. And when we were doing ceremony here, we were dancing and we were singing and we were circling and we were looking, remember, we were looking in each other's eyes. It was very important we would touch each other on the heart for a moment and look in each other's eyes. Because what we're getting to, I think, in this conversation is, and Ken just did a beautiful job of pulling last week's thread forward of like man as a paycheck, you know, all the archetypes that man has played. But in our ceremony here, then after looking in each other's eyes and dancing and telling some stories, and we had an altar and we all sat together, we had men and women in a row sitting opposite each other, and we were doing the circular heart breath, where the woman was exhaling and the man was inhaling her breath. And so the breath was circulating, and we were holding hands going like this, and there was a central flame. And these are some of what our culture has really lost. And I hear this thread among all the group is like, where is that part of like divine feminine, mystery school, sacred intimacy, song, dance, ceremony, starlight, community, that feeling that opens the heart, which is where humans start to really move energy through the multiverse. And if man is just like continually going, where are we going to live? How are we going to pay the bills? What are we going to do for food this week? You know, it's really a challenge to open up that DNA and get that multiverse moving, right? You all hearing this? Someone else want to come in?
We have a very cute 5-year-old who's just interrupted us and is asking for some food.
Go ahead. Anyone want to comment? Do you hear what Ken just said? Like, you know, when it's the small struggle of how to be a human and pay the taxes, and where can I live that I'm safe, like home and family security for chakra stuff. Mm-hmm. And then yet, how do you like open the heart space and provide space for divine feminine to come forth of emotion and feeling and ceremony and singing and looking in one another's eyes, which I like to do a lot with community.
I guess I just want to say that, you know, we are feeling so challenged on that level to try and even connect between us seems, you know, really challenging, although we do find ways to kind of hit the reset button. So yeah, but it's challenging to heal the wounding, but very important.
Go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to say, thank you for sharing, Kim. It's perfect. For me, you know, accessing my heart I've learned that is not a stair-step process, that we can descend into any dimensional space and access our heart. And so I find that when I'm feeling unsafe or survival things are coming up for me, that rarely does going up make me feel better. That really descending into it is the only way I can really get at it. And so I have found that, you know, the way that I most can get through it is just really going down into me and accessing through my, you know, root chakra into the ground, into the earth, into my heart, because you can get to your heart, this, you know, just as far down that space as you can going up. And I find that sometimes, and, you know, Lolita's talked about this a lot, about like, love and light is not the answer in those moments always, you know, like if you just had a positive, you know, response or a positive outlook. No, this is really serious stuff. And, you know, you're clearing out programming, you're clearing out, you know, residue from, you know, sort of karmic imprints that have been passed down generationally through your DNA, you know, 7 generations back, 7 generations forward, 7 generations to each side. This is not something that, you know, necessarily clears out in one space. And when you hit these markers, because I've hit them, and you have those experiences, you have to be in it. It's like there's not, and so I have found that I kind of shift away from wanting everybody, you know, the new earth and this new idea, because all that ends up doing is refocusing you. And right when you're about to get at something, you know, right when you're about to have a full connection in a very different way. So just keep staying in it. I think that's, you know, the most helpful thing that anybody can say is just, you know, just be in it. And it's okay, whatever you're feeling, experiencing, you know, sharing, not sharing, doesn't matter. Just the fact that you're acknowledging it is a big key to your DNA opening up, like Lolita was talking about, not letting it contract, but just, you may not be expanding it, but at least you're not closing it down.
Yeah, anyone want to hop in there? So if you follow my work, and I've learned this work from interacting with all of you, is that if we just want to be positive and kind of bypass the pain, we won't be able to get to that ancestral wound from all different perspectives of self. You have to get into it and really feel it. And then when you're kind of at the bottom of the like darkest stuff, you meet Ereshkigal, right? So we had that whole Venus retrograde period. I was like, descend, folks. Like, Ereshkigal's there. You got to go and meet her. And that's like Lower Sophia. So part of what's happening right now is we're connecting the lowest aspects of Divine Mother. And Ereshkigal, Lindsay knows this story because I told this personally, but the way Inanna is finally able to collect herself is she takes some bits from underneath her fingernails when she's down in the underworld, and she leaves them at the gate of the underworld. And Ereshkigal, of course, finds her guilty, gives her the evil eye, kills her, hangs her on a meat hook to rot. And Inanna's going, I'm never going to get out of this. I'm a flesh decaying object now. And she calls upon these bits of DNA under her fingernails. Now I'm a mythologist, so just go with me here, okay? And the bits of her DNA under her fingernail come to life as little insects, and they go over to Ereshkigal and say, Oh, you're suffering. We hear you. We're with you. Oh, you're crying. We're at the funeral of your husband. I'm here with you. We're here with you. We empathize with you. We have compassion for your sadness. And Ereshkigal's going, oh, I'm in so much pain. And the little flies are going, you're in so much pain. We're here with you. We're here with your pain. And finally, I don't go on with the whole suffering thing, but finally, Ereshkigal says to the little insects, you were compassionate with me in my pain. I'm going to grant you any boon you want. And the little insects, who are actually part of Inanna, say, we want the Queen of Heaven to be reanimated. And she goes, what? Who are you? You want the Queen of Heaven to be reanimated? And they go, yes, well, she's our queen. We want her to be reanimated. And Ereshkigal thinks about this because she was just enjoying the fact that her sister was dead and rotting and green and moldy. And she goes, well, you did comfort me while I was suffering. Yes, Inanna, you can reanimate. Go, Inanna, you're free to go back through the gates. And I'm not going to tell you what that means.
I was gonna say that I feel like when we don't go to that place, we choose not to go, or to even have compassion, or or when you choose that kind of light optimism or that kind of stuff, it feels to me like judgment. You just say to yourself, no, I'm just backing off from that, and I'm just judging that, because almost like taking on the optimism, it isn't truly optimistic because you're judging at the same time. So it's like, what is positivity and what is light? Because we've kind of misunderstood what it is. Because if going into the pit of the hell, where like that's darkness, but that's lightness, because that's, I don't know, it's not dualistic anymore.
Yeah, so we can hear it. We can conceptualize that where we are in our processional age is we're in the balsamic phase. We're in the dark. What my friend Andre, who may or may not be on this call, discussed with me this week is like Emmeline is saying right now, we're experiencing the collective wound. And for many of us, it's incredibly painful, raw and vulnerable. And the people in this group, it's been hitting your chart directly with Chiron returns and Uranus oppositions and all kinds of things that are happening. And I'm not going to share your personal stuff, but everyone's been saying, this is what's going on in my chart. So we're the 0 point generation. This is what Andre said to me this week. He said, we're between the balsamic phase and the beginning of the golden age. We're the 0 point. And as long as we're not judging where we are, like Emmeline just said, we're feeling the raw, we're tapping into that deep unconscious space, then we're holding a 0 point of the last of the Iron Age, the Kali Yuga, or whatever you want to call it. And we're ready to retemplate, but we have to fully get the full raw of how painful it is to be a paycheck and a provider. Like, how does that feel to be like not able to really make love with your spouse because there's so much tension in your house that everything sucks? And to be really there with that and not avoid it, like everything sucks. Okay, those are my Western New York redneck roots right there. But to say that, you know, oh, we're in new earth, and if you just raise your vibration right now, you too will be an avatar of 5D. That's a matrix. And as Ken said, that's another matrix to realize that is a mind control, that we are inside of artificial construct after artificial construct right now that we're peeling away. Including, we have to also question, because I do really want you to be a sovereign human who realizes that you are the greatest technology in the multiverse, that if the Pleiadians show up here on my property today, they are not my gods. If the Arcturians show up here on my property today, they are not my gods. So that sovereignty is from both sides. If we're going to be this cosmic being again, there's a whole lot of incorporating the wonder that you were courageous enough to be here during the darkest of the dark of the balsamic phase and not make anyone your God ever again. Do you hear that? We'll see what people need to say.
I'll just say something. I think that's challenging to my Christian upbringing for a lot of us. I know in the Law of One, have y'all read that? Okay. So I've really been tapping into that idea of praising the infinite one, the one from whom the many came, and that, you know, we all are an aspect of the one. And I think I get a little nervous when people start saying, like, oh, I'm God, or I'm just as good as that God, or I feel like, yes, we are these amazing creatures, but especially in America, it's really hard to be humble. So, yeah, I think there's something to also, you know, there is a hierarchy, I think, in the spiritual realm of wisdom. I mean, there's an underworld queen, and there's a queen of heaven, and there's all these gates and all these chakras and all these different layers of wisdom. But I do think our work in sovereignty here right now is undoing some of those programs that said that we never were worthy, or that it was only outside of ourselves that we could find value in doing this work. And so maybe this lesson is really like, do you feel the wound so that you're really willing to make a conscious choice that, yeah, I don't ever want to do that again. I'm really ready to honor not only other people's lives, but my own life, so that we're not creating these deep wounds for people. But still, I think the priestess in me, and the seminary graduate, and the woman who longs for ceremony to celebrate the divine feminine, it's like I want to have that space where we do, you know, worship. We worship the one infinite light, recognizing that it is also within us. That's totally. So there's my little theological reflection.
I think it takes us to the whole question, you know, just about God, just the word, just the choice, what it means to one person versus another. You know, just I know for myself, my husband doesn't like that word at all. He feels the programming, he feels, you know, the sort of man-made version of that, and so he really repels against that. It took a long time to like let that ease in to be something that was not triggering to him. And for me, I was brought up in a very Christian environment. My mother insisted on getting back at my father, who was an atheist, by putting me in Christian private school and making him pay for it. That was their divorce. So, and she was insistent on me going to church on Sundays and things like that. And I rebelled against all of that, because I rebelled against the idea that that was the only place I could find truth, or that was the only place I was going to find, sort of the comfort that she found in it. And so, I quite often, said I had my own connection and my own connection to God. And at one time I even said, I am God, which got me slapped across the face. And, just because she couldn't take that in, what I was really saying. And I didn't mean that I am all of it, but in some way I did, because I think that we come from that. And it was, as a young kid, very difficult to describe all of those feelings and those emotions about what I was really responding to. I definitely think that from a Trinitized perspective, for me, it's, understanding that I am a child of all of this, that I am a child of the Holy Mother and the Holy Father coming together on some sort of infinite, experience, that's really what I'm here to represent in form. And so for me, that's what it's like. But, when you go down the journey of discovering your star families and your genetic experiences here on Earth, as well as all your galactic imprints and sort of universal imprints, it's hard. You get a little bit lost in what is the one and who is the gods. And there's so much archetypal, sort of energies that we carry, that it's very difficult to sort through. Where is that energy coming from? And where's the highest perspective that I can carry for myself in sovereignty? And I think that's an ongoing thing. For me, it's not something I've figured out 100%. I just know where my heart lies, that it's like I'm reaching for the highest perspective of myself, and at the same time wanting to encompass all of that and wrap it back into myself, all those fragments, all those pieces. But I still feel all the distortion that gets in this, where, they're not my God, they're not the spiritual hierarchy. And there's a lot of that going on. There's still a lot of that going on. I see a lot of even us replicating it through 5D conversations that people have. It's still, coming from this place of spiritual hierarchy. They are evolved to a place where now they're looking down on 3D. They're looking down on 4D. They're looking down on it because they've gotten to a place where they think that they've reached 5D and New Earth, and that's just more spiritual. I mean, it's just programs and learning, and it's taking what we already have and redistributing it to another level and layer. So.
Oh yeah, my Sagittarius self loves this conversation. Oh, let's get wider and wider and wider. So I want to just show a couple of examples in my life, because I was not raised Christian, and I was raised strongly pagan and goddess energy. But then there came a point in my life on my healing journey where yoga became incredibly important to me. And some of you have seen in the chat group that we discussed, like, every teacher that I came upon who was called a guru was in fact found out to be a pedophile, like every single one. And I won't name any names here, but we are talking about how John of God was just arrested, and that he had a host of teenage girls that he was raping and selling babies. So there came a point in my life where I was a kirtan singer, and I sang like repetitive names of gods, like nonstop all day. And I even made a CD with Claude, both Claude and I are musicians. And I realized at some point that these were interdimensional beings. And by invoking Shiva, as much as I totally got Shiva and love Shiva as divine masculine, and I still can sing different Sanskrit prayers to Shiva, I stopped cold turkey because I realized they were interdimensional beings and they were harvesting my energy. And that really freaked me out. My second husband still goes to India every year, and he still sings the Hanuman Chalisa and all of the kirtan songs religiously. And I can see the energy strand that as long as you repeat the name of Ram, Ram will survive, which is the same to me as Ra Ter Er. Ra, Ra, Ram, Ra Ter Er. They are interdimensional beings. And this is going to get hairy, folks, but they live on us. They feed off of us. And it's scary. Because I also associate those 52 syllables of Sanskrit with our chakras. Absolutely. I know the sounds and I know the petals and I know how to activate the chakras with all those sounds. But the Rig Veda, which is the oldest text, which I have upstairs, is a complete disclosure of these are interdimensional beings. And they, just like the archons from the Bible and all other groups who are religiously feeding off of human emotion, it's hard to know. I'm still really figuring out, I've had a few go-rounds with James Gilliland and really went to ECETI to try to explain to him how he was misleading the people. And if you know the whole story of Solretta and James and Solretta's ex-partner, you'll start to question what's going on there. So I'm putting that out right now. Okay. So be careful that, again, I don't feel like there's a hierarchy, not like that the human is somehow more capable than the Arcturian, but we're differently capable in a way that's truly amazing. And so from the beginning of this conversation, what I was saying was to flip the script on everything, to realize that we're not the lowest intelligence in the universe. We're the most amazing, capable intelligence that draws it all. And when we really figure out who we are and how to hold it sacred who we are, that's where we are right now. Do we want sovereignty, or do we want to continue to kind of let the other dimensional beings feed off of us? Because that's what's been going on. And I don't know if you all know what I'm talking about like that, if I'm being clear. So let me know. And this is probably everything in your body's going, what the heck is she talking about? There's archons in the Bible feeding off of us? Yeah.
When I did some research on Jehovah, I can't even remember what, I don't even know if it's just something that I've intuited or something I've read or talked to someone about, but I just have this thing where I just feel very strongly that it's like such a trade-in to this huge fat being. It's just like, I want you. But it's so I feel like when I had to detox that from me, it took so long because it was so fat, almost so addictive and so greedy that it's just so. And I think that's why some people react when you don't agree with them, or they don't agree with you, or you trigger them, and then they react so almost like a different human, different person, almost like direct programming. They're just boom, bitten your head off, and you're like, where did that come from? The person that you love or know, whoever, just suddenly different program completely. And I think that really moves me because that's so unjust. I'm just I care for your soul. I just want to send them love because it's just so unjust that, I do really agree with what you're saying about the archonic different things feeding, because I've definitely felt that.
I always thought of that we were co-creating a web of light, and that the Sanskrit and the Hebrew were these like ancient like webs of light that were co-created through the practice of sacred sound, and that all was created through sound and resonance, and that by kind of joining in with these mantras or prayers, that you're keeping the song moving forward, and that there is a difference between the more archonic beings who are using you for food and tricking you, and a more like benevolent wise being who like Ganesh is like, well, show me those obstacles, or helping activate you. So yeah, this is fascinating because I'm writing about all of this stuff too, and I think personally I have such a connection to Jesus for whatever reason, because of my family. I come from a very long line of Lutheran pastors. I was also such a mystic as a child. Like before I got programmed by crazy evangelical stuff, I was singing in nature and trees, and so I don't know. It's really tricky to navigate, for sure. And you're right, there's a lot of emotions around it all. But I love asking the hard questions, for sure. Yeah, what is, because isn't there this tradition too in the Mexican tradition of remembering the dead, and that's how our ancestors stay alive. And so that our work here is to also be remembered, as well as to remember our ancestors, to kind of amplify the light of all souls, amplify the light of all the saints. I don't know.
I have stuff I can say, but if there's anybody else that wants to talk, because I want to make sure that, everybody's getting a chance to participate. So if nobody will talk, I'm happy to, but going once, going twice. Okay. When I first woke up, more sort of galactivated, just sort of came into the consciousness that I had a galactic history and that I had experiences in other star systems. One of the gifts, and I think we were talking about this when we first started the call, was one of the gifts that I had was being able to see into other people's light body architecture. And at first I had no clue what I was even looking at. Like, it was like I would look at people and they would have things sticking out of them and entities attached to them, and people following them, and weird things were happening. And it took me a while to figure out sort of the structure of that. And very quickly it moved to light body, which was beyond just even the chakra systems, because I had people that came to me that gave all of their time and energy to guru type people and the principles of guru. And I would see the infiltration in their light body architecture, because when you're running that program constantly, you're no longer sovereign, because you're now running a program that's been overlaid on top of who you are organically. But you wouldn't know that because it feels good. You're getting something out of it. I mean, that's one of the things when they're siphoning off of energy, is that you don't necessarily feel it. You're feeling good, you're singing or dancing or experiencing something. But when you really start to look at the layers of the architecture of what's going on, you can see things that are been placed there and it could be through direct lineages, it could be from genetic imprints, it could be from your family line that sort of carried forward. It could be your astrological imprints. It doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. But when we're talking about sovereignty and we're talking about getting to our original blueprints, we have to take a look at and source where these things are coming into us, so that we can decide for ourselves, is this right for me in this moment in time, versus just doing it because it feels right, or it's been there for so long, because I've removed things from people's bodies that weren't supposed to organically be there. And as soon as I did that, you watch the body respond. And in some cases, if it's an entity, for example, they're not too happy about it. And the person feels that instantly. And the first thing they want to say is, what did you do to me? You know, like, why do I feel this way? I'm like, well, something's been siphoning off your energy for a very long time. So you now have a hole in your light body space that you're going to feel. And so, you know, we work on trying to fill that back up with organic light and intention to go back into that space. But, you know, these kind of things bring up a lot of what we connect to, you know, and I had to go through, I mean, this was some really dark night of the soul work to have to go through understanding not only just the removal of these things from light bodies, but also just, you know, the energy behind it. Because I went in to touch something on somebody's body, and it was an implant that was behind the left ear. And it came around and connected down and went straight into the heart and then into the liver. And what it looked like was sort of like some sort of mechanical device here, but it was like threaded with like what I would call like wire all the way down. So I asked, you know, as you would always want to do, you ask if this can be removed, is, you know, is this in the highest and best intention for the person? And I got yes, yes, yes. And so we went to locate it and try to remove it. And as soon as I touched it and opened it up, the entire thing opened up, and tons of little like critters, like mechanical critters, just spread throughout the entire body down in, you know, and this was many, many, many years ago before. And I thought to myself, okay, number one, what did I just do? Number two, you know, calling in people to help me and assist me from my higher perspective, but also just watching how we have to know what we're doing and what we're participating with at all times, because there are things that have been in there and been in our bodies through eons of time, particularly when you get into, some of us have reptilian consciousness in us. Sometimes we come from star systems that we're here to sort of integrate these polarities of darkness and light. And so we're going to carry these things with us. Some of us have been through, you know, wars and witch hunts and all kinds of things. I've pulled out swords and sigils and symbols of people that have had all kinds of things. I've worked with the witches and the Celtic in Scotland, you know, all the knotting that was required for the Celtic knots. That knots up part of your energetic field. You have to unsort them. You know, that's all kept in place. And a lot of things are bound into our systems for a reason, like you were talking about. And some of it is good, and there's beautiful things that can happen that I think as long as we're consciously participating with it, it works. But there's a lot of things that we unconsciously, because we just haven't hit upon it yet, where our bodies, which are very intelligent, are participating with without our knowledge or understanding. And that's where we have to find our sovereignty, is the place that we don't know. It's the, as Lolita said, it's the subconscious. But even beyond that, it's like where we came in and why are we inspired to connect with certain things? Is it, you know, in our highest and best interest, or should we be taking a look at that in order to reevaluate, you know, who we are and what we want to be? And most of these things are happening to prevent us from being the 12-strand DNA human that we are capable of. And so you have to ask the question, why it's been placed there. What are they trying to suppress or oppress? And, you know, all of these things that I found in the light body is all, the placement of it is to prevent connection almost every time. Tons of stuff in the third eye, this is the, you know, you get into the mouth of God in the very back, you get into, this is the higher connection to your, you know, so your higher light bodies. So you go into the monadic and avatar levels. You can have stuff that's going on up above your head that you don't even, you know, you're not even connecting to, because people are only stopping at their 7th chakra, but the chakras above are completely cut off because somebody has inserted something into your energetic field that you're not even aware of. You know, those kind of things that start to happen. And any of these things can be removed by you with clear and direct intention. You don't even require, I mean, I rarely do this kind of work anymore because most people can do it themselves. And if they can't, I can teach them really quickly how to do it, because you want to empower anybody to figure out what's going on that's in their best interest and not. And you know, believe it or not, I've had people say they didn't want something removed. And I was like, okay. You know, even though I saw it as not necessarily for their highest good, you have to be ready. And so a lot of times the soul will say, no, they're not ready. But in many cases they are. So that's my little take on that.
Okay, well, I'm going to thread this forward. Claude is here now. So he was with me when we were doing kirtan, and when I had like a total severing and realization that I couldn't do that anymore. And for some years, I couldn't even do yoga. I had to be very careful with what was actually helping my light body and what was not. So I had to like cold turkey quit everything for a while and find out if these postures were also manipulating me. So I had to really figure it out. And everyone, sometimes what Laura and I have also discussed is I had to go through that to know that. Like,
Yeah.
So don't discount that you're studying something and then you found out like, I'm throwing that, even if it's Aramaic, like I'm throwing that all away because that's a control mechanism. And again, I'm just going to pull it forward that we humans really are, and this is all in humility, needing to flip the script now that we are not the lowest intelligence, that many star systems and interdimensional beings have been feeding on us for the entirety of human existence. And in order to really come into sovereignty, we got to question everything right now. Ken, did you want to say something? You had your hand up before.
Wow, a lot of stuff is coming up for me from this conversation. Yeah, there's so much. So one thing that I guess I experience is, of course, wanting to not go there into the hard feelings because it's painful. And I think one way we can help each other is by creating a container. And I've seen this done. I went to a ceremony or a gathering that happened right after 9/11, and everyone was feeling super raw. It was just north of New York, actually. And what we did is had the men make, the women went on the inside and the men made the container to hold the space. And then the women were in there and we're holding it kind of, there's this image of a wall and the water is the emotion. And then some of the women just went so deep and raw into the wailing. You know, you're holding the space. And so I guess it was like collectively we were able to push through the difficult parts, whereas individually it can be really hard to push through hard stuff. So then also that can lead us to things like, you know, using cannabis or other things to not have to go there, which is something, you know, we've talked about. And obviously I've experienced. There's that. Maybe I'm asking, or, you know, just reminding us, you know, or saluting Lolita for bringing us together, because that creates a way for us to collectively work with the material so that we're not all just stuck individually doing it. Because, you know, it's, yeah, it's a lot for one person.
I appreciate that the topic of, like, I feel like in my mind, our kind of story that's getting played out again, because this sort of crossroads of all these challenges that we're having, we've had them before. And so I feel like it is this template, and it's almost like this malefic, parasitic energy that is like we're traveling into this, the world is different, but we're still playing out some of these old programs, trying to solve these problems with the old programs in this new kind of world, and with our kind of awakened selves, but yet still kind of, you know, going back into our subconscious and getting into our old wounds. I have been kind of like, you know, visiting my own womb story and birth story and my first 6 years of life, and really having some, I guess, like epiphanies about that, and taking care of that child and that baby and those experiences that happened. And that does feel like it is healing, and that I am helping not only myself, but my family, and sort of the schematics of the geometry. But it is really amazing just like how instantly triggered you can get, and then you're just back in that old template again, and just like, yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, this is drawing together so many worlds right now. This is amazing. So we're drawing together kind of the template of the wound and this super cosmic template of who am I really. So I want to just respond to Shannon and Ken that I've also been posting some things by the epigenetics community who are talking about where does the matrix come from? So we can watch the movie The Matrix. Where does it come from? That's what you're getting to here, Shannon. Because if we've had 6,000 years of the womb and the intimacy between man and woman in a chaotic state, where is it that the matrix comes from? It comes from the womb. The matrix comes from the womb. And if the mother is stressed, angry, or fearful during birth, or alone, or abandoned, or all those things you can imagine, or drugged, or shaved, or scared from the doctor, the imprints are right there. That's where it comes from. So if you have so you say you were pregnant right now, Shannon, which is why, some clients who have said to me, we're thinking of having another baby. Can you see it in the chart? And I'm going, okay, well, let me just answer that from an astrological perspective. Okay, we've got Saturn and Pluto on the South Node right now. Like I started this group with a baby that was born this week with what its chart is magnetizing is unbelievable. But in addition to that, solar and solar system consciousness that you get in your chart, you have the matrix of what happens in the womb. And if the womb has collective trauma again and again and again, we will marry someone who will bring that trauma up for us. No doubt. And if you don't do it with that partner, like in the case with Claude and I ran the chart of my natal chart with his father's chart, who he was really bringing in when Uranus was going over all his personal planets. Like, I got to meet Bodo Richter, let me tell you. Whoa. And my chart with Bodo Richter, who is Claude's father, had all kinds of conjunctions, like more than even Claude, I needed to deal with Bodo Richter. So be sure that wherever, and maybe Emmeline's going to talk about this, and Holly, because there's been some, comparison charts of our partner with the father, with like, why did I marry this person? What's going on? You're right on track because you're digging up the most painful wound in your ancestral line by marrying someone who can dig it up for you. And for that, you got to be like, let's do this. Let's be souls together and really support each other through the template change. So I'll stop because it seems like this is kind of thrilling. Go ahead, people.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Um, both on the idea of being physically intimate with a partner and having done energy work and knowing how to do some energy work, in seeing those very wounded parts of my partner. Like, I was once partnered with a man who had a very, very deep wound in his heart chakra, and it had presented in my mind as like this big gaping like emptiness. I can remember working with this person with their permission on how to like heal that, but then I had to look within myself, like, why did I attract a partner to myself that had a very big wounded heart chakra? And realizing that I had to work with myself to understand, what that was within myself that magnetized that other person. And that also kind of led me to a lot of work with what was going on in my ancestry, and I have been recently looking at my father's chart and kind of understanding on different levels of how different wounds are being replicated through the generations, and even going forward into what's going on with my daughter's chart. So I'm looking at my dad's chart and my partner, her father's, what I know of his chart a little bit, and looking at her chart and saying, okay, there's some recurring themes here that it looks like is part of the work that I'm doing to kind of unravel that. And then my own coming to terms with some of the pain around those wounds, and recognizing that there is a part of just doing that work that is like holy service, that what we do in coming here, even though some of our experiences feels very painful to me, that there is a sacredness in everything, and a beauty in it, and a beauty of like really kind of cleaning out that wound is very kind of Virgo to me. Cleaning out the wound and this like the sacredness of like that, cleaning it out and in putting it back together and holding it gently. And it's really interesting. Today was a day where I had been to a event for my daughter, a school event, and so I'm there with her dad and his partner, and we're all together, and it's very lovely, and it's like, oh, wow, we have really come really far to come back together on a heart level where we can all be together at the same table, and we're talking about upcoming events and how we're all going to collaborate together to get some family stuff done, and it's to me that has been like a lot of thinking about this week, about this is what's going on in these little interactions that I have with other people, and how I may not always know on an energetic level what I'm interacting with, because I'm not working with everyone and consciously in an energetic way, but in an unconscious way, these little wounds are always coming up, and there's always that opportunity to treat them with like that gentleness and with a kind of a healing love, rather than kind of shifting into the like angry, frustrated place, which I think I would have like 5 or 10 years ago. And then thinking about what in the past with other partners, who have I interacted with, and what have I transferred back and forth, and how that has affected me on a molecular level, and being more conscious about that. And I think that's a bit rambly, but a bit like something just flashed. And really, in sometimes just feeling so connected with whoever I'm talking with, I can just really even see them in my third eye. And just as I feel like as things kind of clear and harmonize, getting kind of like almost like telepathic communication, or, you know, sounds cliche, but working on the same wavelength has really kind of come through this week. So I feel like I got off topic, but that's kind of where I am.
Yeah, that, you know, I just want to pull something forward from what you're saying there of the wave, you know, the feeling that and seeing that from a third eye perspective. In one of the videos, I don't know if I shared this in the group or not, but John Wheeler, who was a scientist at the same time as Einstein, was talking about how intimately we are connected to the universe. And what Einstein was trying to explain was the field, like Holly's talking about right now, like being in the field and choosing to be in that kind of loving consciousness rather than reactive to the pain. And Einstein talked about how intimately we are connected to the universe, that there was what he called spooky action at a distance, meaning that our consciousness and our observation of things like that affects reality. And it's a big, long scientific process where our thoughts, our feelings, and emotions are continually affecting, like what they were using in scientific control studies. So what your emotion was would affect like the way the electrons were moving in the test tube, okay? What John Wheeler said was that our participation in that, in realizing that every place we look, okay, with the ex-partner and the child and his partner, every place we look, we are creating a reality based on our participation and our feeling content around it. And he went on to say that creation would continue to expand based upon our looking, like our witnessing creates creation. I mean, we can look at the black hole at the supergalactic center and keep looking, and the galaxy and the universe will keep expanding because it's our looking that creates reality, like we as conscious observers. And so what Holly, what you're describing, whether you know it or not, is that that participation and choice that you're making right there is creating the new template. You're creating reality right there. Do people understand what I'm saying here?
I just found it interesting what you said, Lolita, about when you're looking at something and you're creating it. And this week I was reading about Selena, the asteroid, and her mythology. And a lot of that is about looking. It's from what I was reading, it was like developing mutual connection through the eye contact and the power of eye contact. Yeah, don't know what else I want to say about that, but that's just really funny that I was really connecting with that this week, and you just said that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like we're starting to close down. Like we've had a lot of conversation and opened some really big pathways as participants in the multiverse right now from everything that we've said. And to drag it on further would just probably be to exhaust us. So I want to see if there's anything else that anyone wants to say. Grant, did you want to say something about John Wheeler or any of that Einstein type of stuff?
Well, I definitely had to note that it's a participatory universe. I think that was something I had come across recently, and I think that can relate back to witnessing the wounds in ourselves and in the collective. And there's such that temptation, like Ken was saying, and thank you, Ken, for sharing. Great to have him on, but the temptation to pull away or retract or even close up and perpetuate that wound or guard the wound in a way, go and hide, and not do the work, not witness, not open to the wound's existence, right? And participate in the healing of the wound then, or participate in up-leveling that. And I think too, that's sort of a men's group type question of, in what ways are we observing the universe, sort of back here, look at all the problems, but like, okay, let's lean in and really participate and almost bring out a righteous anger, as opposed to just a diminutive, dismissive, everything's busted, there's nothing we can do. So, shifting into our sovereignty, it ties back to being in a participatory universe.
Add to that, I've been kind of stewing it over for a while. Hi everyone, Andre, nice to meet everyone. So there's kind of the moving towards the concept of a couple of things. So co-creation, right? Like when we're looking at something, right, we're co-creating it with the field and with other beings and with other intelligences. But for example, like, and this is going to tie up a lot of threads. Like if it's me, just like my small self, versus me, like I'm expanding, I'm opening up some of like the centers in my energy field, right? That like I have a much bigger vote when I do that, versus like, and that's why like the whole control structure, they want to implant these etheric things and keep us down, because they know our vote is going to be, our energy kind of level is going to be that much smaller. So instead of saying like 100 points, right, towards co-creating this thing, it'll be like 70 or like 30, right? So as we evolve, as we kind of unplug all of these things in our fields and ourselves, we have a much bigger like vote, a much bigger impact when we co-create, when we kind of interact with the field. So that's a big piece. Another piece is resonance versus like feeding off of. So like when I work with and I work with, I do something called Arcturian healing. So I work with Arcturians, I work with other beings, and for me it's just like, I mean, it's just like a friend walks in the room while I'm doing a healing. It's just like, oh hi, oh can you help with us? Good, cool. But it's not, it's like, it's a resonance thing. I will work with a being or even like the archangels or with dragon energy, and that energy can resonate in my field so that I embody a certain quality. I'm not feeding off of it, it's not feeding off of me, but you have to get maturity in your energy system so that you can interact and not like, oh my god, it's an ET, it's an archangel, it's a dragon, oh my god, right? And then like, here you go, like I'm gonna, and so that's a big piece of just holding that maturity, and that like, yeah, like we're both energetic spiritual beings. You have progressed to this level, I've progressed to this level. There is kind of, I mean, the hierarchy is maybe not the best word, maybe like a holarchy, but it's not a giving away of power. It's a resonance and co-creating type feel. And another kind of idea is we do this, and I'm actually thinking of doing a workshop on this. It's called uncollapsing the wave. So we have the observer effect, right? When we observe something, it's like it locks like the quantum infinite fluctuating field into that particular aspect, right? Or like if you observe, or like the Schrodinger's cat, like you open the box and it's one or the other. But there's a way that your consciousness can do what's called uncollapsing the wave. And so if you look at a wounding pattern, I do this in healing sessions all the time. If I know like someone has like a knee problem, if I observe it, I have to first acknowledge it and basically love it and just give it that energy. But I can observe it in such a way that it backs off, and it's like almost as if like the quantum field isn't locked in that condition. So when we look into our wounding, there's so much love we have to kind of resonate with that wounding, so that we actually step towards it, and then we can say, okay, well, I choose not to resonate with that wound, and then that's kind of the magic of undoing it and co-creating something else. So there's a lot of just loose threads I've just been stewing on. I don't know where we want to pick up from there.
Wow, this is divine. What a group we've had tonight. This is amazing. I mean, we've really been all over the place here. This is like the microcosm and the macrocosm in this discussion. You know, the wound and the whole participatory universe, and how we've brought that all together in this conversation is truly amazing. Like my brain is going, oh, whoa, look at what we can hold when we choose to come together and hold a space for the communication to happen. This is just incredible. And we could go on and on now into epigenetics and how do you light up your DNA? How do you bring on that 12-strand DNA? Like, I'm ready to have that conversation. Maybe not tonight, but I'm going to start to close now. So if anyone wants to say anything else, go ahead now. Okay, so I'm going to close by just being truly grateful that you are all so committed to, despite time zones and other influences in your life, to show up today, and for the strength and perseverance that we all held in our own sovereign space to put forth what we needed to say. I truly honor you and thank you for being on this group chat tonight. So I'm going to say goodbye for now.